To make it easier to follow along with the lesson, please reset your user settings or make sure the mouse presets are on 3-button or regular mouse. If you do not know how to change the settings, please watch our UI video first. Today, we will go over how to make the garments you made in Marvelous Designer ready for a VFX pipeline. In this tutorial, we will discuss how to organize and prep your garment for an efficient workflow that is compatible with VFX. We will start with this dress that I created. At this point, the dress is already at particle distance of 5, and I am happy with how it looks. Please note that if you change your garment after you retopologize, you may have to update your topology. So please, make sure that you are absolutely satisfied at this point with how your garment looks. The first thing to do is rearrange your patterns in your 2D pattern window to resemble more or less how you would want to arrange them in the UV space. Right now, we are just arranging them loosely so that we can save time arranging them in the UV editor. For this tutorial, I will be using UDIMs and I will group my patterns according to how I want to texture them later. I try to keep my shells with the same materials next to each other so that it's faster and more organized to texture. Let us start retopology. Since this dress is mainly made up of rectangular patterns, I will use the patch topology tool. This tool is a quick way to produce clean topology. It makes sure that the shared edges and the mirrored patterns have the same amount of topology. Please note, when using this tool, you will have to go back and check that all the topology meets the edges of all your patterns. When I topologize, I create more edges around areas I know that have more motion/animation. In this case, the waist will need more topology. I also look for an edge flow that is compatible with the body below the garment. Please note, for more unique pattern shapes, you will have to manually create topology to have the edge flow that you want. If you want a more in-depth tutorial on how to use our retopology tool, please refer to our retopology video linked down below. Also, something to note, please make sure that your shared edges are matching. If there are 20 vertices on one side of the skirt, then the shared edge must also have 20 vertices. This is so that later, when we merge our geo together in Maya, all your edges can be merged easily. Once I have my topology that I like, I will right-click on the clean topology and select Remesh Duplicate. This option will allow me to keep my high-res mesh and create a new topologized mesh. I will need my high-res mesh to project back on the details to my new mesh. Now we will go into our UV editor menu and start UVing. From here, you will see that the UVs are scattered, but you can simply right-click on the screen and you will see a few options pop up. In this case, I want to reset UV to 2D arrangement. The patterns will update to match the patterns in the 2D pattern window, and from here you can arrange your UV shells to your liking. This is why it was important to arrange your patterns as close as you could to what you wanted them to look like in your UV space. Currently, your UV shells from your original mesh and new mesh are stacked on top of each other. This is very important at this stage to make sure that your original mesh UVs and your new mesh UVs stay stacked on top of each other as you rearrange your UVs. You can ensure this by selecting the area of the shells rather than clicking them one by one. I will also show you in Maya later why this is so important. When arranging UVs, you must always scale uniformly. This is to ensure that later when you texture, the scale is not inconsistent when you assign the same material to different shells. Please make sure to optimize the 0 to 1 space as much as possible, meaning fill up the tiles with your shells without leaving too much empty space. This is so that you can get the most amount of resolution when texturing. I also like to group UV shells according to their material. In this case, I group them into 3 groups: the outer layer of the dress, the inner layer of the dress, and the ribbons. Now that I've UV'd, I'm completely satisfied with how they look, and I will move back into our 2D pattern window, and from here we will start exporting. You will export your new retopologized mesh as well as your high-res mesh. Select your high-res mesh in the 3D viewport. Once selected, move them in your 2D pattern window away from your new mesh patterns. This way you can easily select your mesh to export. Please make sure to name them properly so that you can find them easily. These are my settings for export. For this tutorial, I am using Maya and I do need weld on. I did not use any textures, so I will turn off all of those maps. And I will make sure that my unified UV coordinates are checked on. And I do use centimeters in Maya, so I will export in centimeters to ensure that the scale is correct. I will do the same to the second mesh. Once I have exported, I will launch Maya and import my 2Geo. After you set your project and have a new scene up, import both Geo. I will go to Windows, General Editor, Namespace Editor, and make sure to delete your Geo and merge to root. This is to make sure that your paths work correctly. I like to take this time to rename my Geo and group them, but please take this time to organize your scene according to your project. Once you've done that, open up your UV editor under the UV tab and double check that your high-res and retopologized mesh have matching UVs. It is good practice to always check at this stage if your UVs are matching. If they're not matching, you will not be able to do the next steps. At this point, I like to reassign shaders. For this tutorial, I will be using Arnold, so I will pick the Arnold standard shader. After I assign both my mesh to the same Arnold shader, I will rename my shader. I also like to soften my edges under mesh display so that the geo no longer facets. Once you do everything, make sure to go to Edit and then under Delete by Type, hit History. At this point, you will merge your new mesh together. Let me explain what I mean. In this case, my skirt is made up of 4 patterns, but I need that skirt to be one piece. I like to use my UV editor to help me select all my verts to merge. Make sure to merge vertices and not edges. Merging edges will change your UV shell, and that is not what you want. At this point, you can go to your modeling toolkit, and under there you can see how many vertices you have selected. Keep an eye on the number of vertices, and once you merge, make sure you have twice as less vertices. Use Edit Mesh, Merge to make them one. You will have to go in manually sometimes to combine verts together. Once everything is merged, make sure to delete history. Select just your high-res and check how many tries it has. Note the number and then select your new mesh and smooth until it gets as close as possible to the number of tries of your high-res. You will go to Mesh, Smooth, and from here you can subdivide as much as you need. This number does not have to be exact, but please make sure to get as close as possible. The reason you want to do this is so that you can retain as much of the detail of your high-res mesh onto your new mesh. Once the tries are close in number, you will delete history on your new mesh. The reason the UVs need to match will be answered in this following step. You will go to Mesh, Transfer Attributes, and select the square on the right-hand side so the menu pops up. At this point, what we are trying to do is project the details of the high-res onto the retopoed mesh. The first section of this menu, you will select what you want to transfer from the high to the clean retopology. In this case, we want to transfer the position and make sure to turn everything else off. In the second section of the menu, you will select from what space or common denominator you will be using. In this case, we are using the UV space. Again, this is why it is absolutely important that they share the exact same UVs. Make sure before hitting transfer that you have selected your high-res mesh first, and then shift select your new retopology mesh. Click transfer, and if done correctly, your new mesh will snap into the position of your high-res mesh. Delete history at this point. Make sure to save your scene. For this tutorial, we will be using ZBrush to add more details onto our garment and also to create displacement maps. So please export out your retopologized mesh. Once we opened up ZBrush, we will start importing in our mesh. Please make sure to go to Display Properties and check on Double. This is just so that you can see how your garment looks. Once in ZBrush, you can subdivide until you get a high resolution so that you can add your micro wrinkles and other details to your garment. Once you finish sculpting, you will save your project and export out your displacement map. We will go into Z plugin, multi-map exporter, export options. Under file names, I will change to TIFF and UV tile IF format to UDIM. Under displacement, I click on Smooth UV 3 channels 32-bit EXR. DP sub pix will be the highest number of subdivisions you have. In this case, my highest subdivision is 3. These are my settings for displacement. Once you have everything set up, please click on Create All Maps. Make sure that you're saving in the right location and hit save and go for a coffee because it will take a moment. Once displacements are created, you will re-export out your lowest subdivision from ZBrush and bring it back into Maya. You want to do this because you have added more details and the geo has changed. So you need to update your mesh in Maya to reflect these changes. Make sure that in Preferences, Import Export, you turn off Group before exporting. If not, your geo will be imported into parts and you don't want that. In Maya, we will import our updated mesh. Once again, you will delete the namespace and merge to root and rename. Please also take this time to organize your scene again. I also take this time to reassign my material to my dress again, and also go to Mesh Display and Soften Edges. Now that everything is set up, I did take this time to assign the different materials to my dress. So like I said before, I have the outer dress, the inner dress, and the ribbons, and so I just assigned Arnold standard shaders accordingly. I'm going to now move on to how to set up your displacements onto your garment. In your GeoShape node under your attributes editor, you will find the Arnold section, and then from there, you will find the subdivision tab. Open that up. These are my settings for subdivision, and this is so that your renders aren't faceted and your geo is smooth. Iterations will depend on your geo, so please increase the amount or decrease the amount according to your geo. I did end up underneath the displacement tab adjusting my height, but I will show you later why I've adjusted it. We will now go into our Hypershade editor. And from here, we will delete unused nodes. I like to do this before I start anything so that my scene is clean and I can work as fast as possible. As you can see, I already have a displacement node attached to my dress material, and I will walk you guys through this and then do an example with you guys. For my dress, I ended up just putting in a very simple diffuse, and then I brought in a tileable texture for my bump. This will obviously vary according to your garment, so please take this time to texture your garment and plug in your maps according to the shader that you are using. Once I plug in all of my texture maps, I will add a displacement node. From there, I will bring in the files that I've exported from ZBrush, and those will be my displacement maps. And I'll show you again on my inner dress. Now, in my inner dress, I only have a very simple color for the albedo and a tileable texture for my bump map. And from here, we will click on the empty space, and then we'll press tab, and a little bar will pop up, and from here we will type in displacement. And you can select that displacement shader. You will get rid of the shader group that comes with the displacement, and you'll select your shader group, and then you will middle click your displacement node and drag it into your displacement slot. That way it is connected. You'll also bring in a file node, and you can do it in the same way by pressing tab on the empty space and typing in file texture. And from here, we will bring in our displacement mask from ZBrush. On the right hand side in your menu, you will see a folder icon. You will click that and bring in your maps. At this point, you will change to UDIM. since that is the naming convention that we selected earlier in ZBrush, and make sure that you are on raw for color space because we did end up using EXR. And so from here, in the same manner, you will middle mouse click your file and drag it into your displacement. And that is how I plug in my displacement maps. At this point, we are ready to Lookdev. When I Lookdev, I usually use a low resolution while I work. This is so that I can just quickly check to see if my displacements are working and if my materials are looking good. Under the Arnold tab, you will select Open Arnold Render View, and from there you will see a window pop up. From here, I do like to bring in a sky dome light, and how I bring that in is through the Arnold tab under Lights. And it is looking the way I want. I will show you briefly what I mean by the height being default at 1. You can see it is very, very poofy. The height number will vary according to your garment and how much displacement you desire. In this case, I thought 0.2 was the amount of displacements that I liked for this garment. After I have my displacements that I want, I will light my scene and render it out. And with that, we completed the entire workflow to get a garment from Marvelous Designer compatible for a VFX pipeline. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, hit the like button below and subscribe for more. If you have any questions about getting started in Marvelous Designer or this lesson, please leave a comment below and we will do our best to answer your question. If you want more information on Marvelous Designer, check out our website, forum, or official Discord channel in the link below.